Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Data Playbook. Now that we have Week 12 kicked off with Thursday Night Football, we're going to look into the Sunday day games one by one. So if this is not the pregame of the two teams that you're looking for, go look for the other video that should be on the channel. But otherwise, let's get into this one. The next review is over Jacksonville going to Arizona, where Jacksonville is favored on the money line with a spread of 2.5 and a total line of 47.5. There's your team averages over the season. And then if we look at the rankings, you have Jacksonville that's a little mixed offensively, with a scoring rank that's about average at 13, just into the bottom third for their passing rank, but in the top third in the league for their rushing rank. However, their tight ends follow their passing rank. Now, defensively, it's about the same story, with an allowed scoring rank of 12, an allowed passing rank of 25, so not very good at stopping the pass, but an allowed rushing rank of 3, so they're really good at stopping the rush. With Arizona, you have something similar offensively with a scoring rank of 19, but their passing rank instead is the one that's top third at 8. Their rushing rank's bottom third at 23. However, they're the best in the league at utilizing their tight end. However, defensively, it's a little bit more average with a passing rank of 19 and allowed rushing rank of 16, but they are really bad at stopping teams from scoring. For your quarterbacks, you have Trevor Lawrence and Jacoby Brissett, with Lawrence averaging 15.8 fantasy points per game and Brissett averaging 15.3. With Trevor Lawrence, you have 8 interceptions, with 1 fumble that was lost due to a sack and 1 additional rushing fumble. Jacoby Brissett has 3 interceptions, with an additional 3 fumbles lost due to sacks. Flipping over for your player averages, and then looking at how they impact the rushing game, you have Trevor Lawrence with 17.7% of the rushing carry share. That's off an average of almost 5 carries per game. And over here, we can't quite see this. It looks to be a little lower, so maybe about 15% of the team's rushing yard share, and that's off of 18.1 rushing yards per game. Brissett has much less of an impact, with only 3 carries per game on average, and that gives him probably about 8 or 9% of the rushing carry share, and maybe even a little less with the rushing yard share at 7%. But again, we can see these numbers in more detail next up with the running backs. So moving right into our running backs, you have Travis Etienne and Bam Knight, with Travis averaging 14.3 fantasy points per game and Bam Knight averaging 7.1. There are no turnovers that either running back has given up this season. And then if we look at their share and averages, you have Etienne with 55.8% of the team's rushing carry share and 59.9% of the team's rushing yard share. And over here with Bam Knight, you have 22.5% of the team's rushing carry share and 17.4% of the team's rushing yard share. Over here with Arizona, it's much more spread out since you've had several different running backs in the game that have rotated through. So you'll see a lot more. And of course, Bam Knight has a lot less since he's been in, much less. But now that he's secured the starting job for the last couple of weeks, this might still continue to grow. So getting into our receiving game with our number 1 receivers, which would normally be Brian Thomas Jr. and Marvis Harrison Jr., but both are listed as out. So instead we have Jacoby Myers and Michael Wilson, with Myers getting an average of 9.6 fantasy points per game, and Michael Wilson averaging 8.5, with no turnovers for either receiver. We'll go into the averages and look at the share, with Jacoby Myers having about 16% of the team's total target share and 19% of the team's receiving yard share. This is just short of the number 1 spot for targets, and it actually is the number 1 for receiving yards. And that's pretty impressive given that he came in a little late from, I believe, the Raiders earlier on. So this has all been from the last several games with Jacksonville. For Michael Wilson, you get about 16.4% of the team's target share and 16.9% of the team's receiving yard share. And that makes him about the 3rd largest receiver on the team. So moving into what would be our second receivers. However, they're the 3rd ones since we have our first ones hurt, but they move up to the 2nd spot. So we have Parker Washington and Greg Dortch, with Washington averaging almost 9 fantasy points per game and Dortch averaging about 5.5. Neither player has given up any turnovers, and so there's their season averages. And then their breakdown, with Parker Washington getting about 14.6% of the team's target share and the same amount 14.6% of the team's receiving yard share. For Greg Dortch, he gets about 6.5% of the team's target share and about 5.6% of the team's receiving yard share. Wrapping up the receiving game with tight ends, you have Brenton Strange and Trey McBride. Strange averages about 8 fantasy points per game, and Trey McBride has been averaging about 18.5. Neither tight end has any turnovers, so we'll look at their season averages. And then their target share, with Brenton Strange being more of a backup and not having a ton of games in, and coming back in after Week 5 being his last appearance. He only gets about 6.6% of the team's total targets and about 8.5% of the team's receiving yard share. With Trey McBride, he gets a significant portion on his team with 29% of the team's target share and 29.3% of the team's receiving yard share. That makes him the number 1 receiver on the team as well, but I guess that would be expected from a team that has the rank of number 1 for their tight end. So there's all the data that we can go through for this game right now. This could be a really interesting game depending on how both teams play it. Right now, the numbers would indicate that Arizona should be passing the ball a whole bunch against an allowed passing rank of 25, since there should be a bunch of gaps there for them to throw the ball around. However, could they be impacted without Marvin Harrison Jr. there? We'll have to see. And then for Jacksonville, it's the vice versa, with a rushing rank of 8 against an allowed rushing rank of 16. They should shut down Arizona's rushing game as well with this allowed rushing rank of 3. So Jacksonville may be able to run the ball on Arizona while Arizona passes the ball on them. And then especially with this tight end rank 2 also being 1 against this allowed tight end rank of 30. So seems like Arizona should have the passing game in hand while Jacksonville will own the running game. The biggest concern for me here would be these scoring ranks where even with all that, Arizona's still not great at scoring for themselves, and they're really bad at stopping their opponents, where Jacksonville's much more average. So if Jacksonville can take advantage of that, then the rest may not matter as much, but I guess we'll just have to see how it really turns out. And there's the data for that pregame review. I hope you found it interesting and useful, and if you did, leave a like and subscribe, and leave a comment on what else you might want to see in the future. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next one.